Hello, and welcome back to the Chris McPherson Show. After a week of hiatus from our weekly shows, we are back. We've listened to a little bit of feedback, and we're going to rejig and rejuvenate things, keep it a little shorter and sharper for you this evening. Of course, if you're not already, make sure you are following us on all of our social media channels. You can catch us at the Chris Mac Show on Facebook, X, TikTok, and Instagram to keep up to date throughout the week, of course. And stay tuned to our daily doses as well as we continue to bring lots of content to you, sports specific, on each of those episodes. But to get things underway for the first half of Around the Grounds today, we're going to welcome in our producer, the man behind the ones and twos, Mr. J.R. Carter, and the host of the Talking Para podcast, Mr. Adam Martin. J.R., good to see you back after a little break.
Thank you, mate.
Adam, nice to see you. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's been a while. I missed your voice, mate. I saw your message the other day saying I miss hearing your voice, and here we are. I'm hearing it. I'm happy to talk to you.
Well, look, mate, I'm feeling for you with how Para are going, and it probably ties in nicely to where we're going to kick this show off with Para's rivals and their, look, at best shithousery, at worst just absolutely ordinary behaviour. The Penrith trainer who decided that it was okay to run through in front of the kick as Jaden Campbell's lining up a kick to extend the lead out to 4 points for the Titans. What's your takeaway on this? Like a $50,000 fine and a 5-week suspension. He's not paying that. And he's going on holidays.
Yeah, you've nailed that. It's not going to worry him at all. But I guess it's the history of Penrith and Penrith trainers. Like it started back in 2021 against Parramatta. Actually, funny you mention it. With I think it was a elimination final up there during COVID, and trainer stopped the game. Even though before he even got out to the injured player, who ended up being fined, by the way, with Parramatta having a 7-on-3 overlap at 8-6 in the game at the current time. So they've got a history of doing it, and it kind of all just ties into, I guess, people getting over the smugness of Penrith, and all those things kind of align into what happened on the weekend. And look, in regards to it, as we're talking about off air, I'm pretty sure that Campbell still had enough chance to kick that goal, but it shouldn't happen. And you can't blame the trainer. I'm going straight to the source, so I'm blaming the coach. He's sitting there laughing in the box, laughing at it after the game. It was clearly a plan to distract the kicker.
Adam, you've been involved in coaching and playing and all sorts of different things, though. Even if this wasn't the coach's directive, at such a tense moment in the game, I reckon if I'm the coach and that's my trainer, I'm probably seeing the humorous side of it, even though I know there's going to be blowback after the fact.
Yeah, you're probably right, but I guess kind of as a coach as well, there's been multiple different trainers now. I think it's 3 different trainers involved with 3 different things at Penrith over the years, and it always seems to come back, and it's got to be coming from somewhere. I know as a coach, I wouldn't direct him to do that. I'm looking at the kicker there. I think he's probably about a 70% kicker from the sideline anyway, and I'm kind of backing my team. You got some pretty clutch players in that Penrith team that probably could have come with a big moment to win that game either way.
Well, I'm taking every advantage I can, although I'm probably sending my trainer behind him just to give him a bit of feedback and maybe just asking him, you're breathing in or breathing out as you're kicking it, maybe the lolly legs or something else that you might sneak away with. JR, is this just Penrith becoming the New England Patriots and this is their own version of Deflategate or something like that?
Look, I don't know. It's just a brain fart moment. What's he doing out there in the first place? Isn't the rest of his team setting up behind the posts? There's just 0 point for him to actually be in that area at that time.
Yeah, I think that's where it comes down to people asking the question whether it might have been intentional. It's a really, weird thing if they have gone and planned that far ahead. It's up there with that Bloodgate we saw in English rugby a couple of years ago where they had, they'd gone to a joke shop and bought a fake blood capsule and all these sorts of things. But either way, he's going to have a 5-week holiday. Penrith are going to pay the fine. And I tell you what, if I'm another NRL club, Adam, and a game's coming down to the wire, and we know Penrith at the moment are on the cusp of the top 4, if it's the Roosters and the Dolphins this weekend and I'm the Roosters trainer, I'm probably considering, if it's the difference between making the top 8 and not.
Well, there's an easy solution though as well, though. As you said, right in the sideline trainer on pass, the Titans actually had some fans at the game. This could have been hurling abuse himself to. That was the Titans kicking, wasn't it? So it was like a Penrith home game. So you think he probably would have been copping anyway. They could have relied on that. But you're right, Roosters, Dolphins this week as well. It's set a bad precedence because $50,000 is nothing to the Roosters, is it?
That's the change down the back of Nick Politis' couch, I think, $50,000. So we'll wait and see what comes of it. I think they probably need to take a stronger stand in the off-season and find a solution. I proposed it a little earlier that maybe it is a situation where they say, look, if you're seen to be, a foul, then, it's going to be a situation where you've got a penalty on the halfway rather than a kickoff. And I think that's going to be more of a disincentive in a tight game because all of a sudden if a team gets a penalty, even on a tough day, they're either starting their attack on halfway or potentially sort of 30, 35 out with a kick for touch. So we will wait and see see where that comes to.
Yeah, I kind of agree. There'll definitely be some kind of overreaction from the NRL, some kind of rule change. Just adds another complication to the game. Probably next year, hopefully, not something that comes in during the finals, and something we probably won't see again for another 5 years anyway.
Let's move on from the men's game to the women's game. And Adam, our hometown for all three of us, Newcastle hosted the NRLW Magic Round on the weekend. We've already seen some people from other parts who suggest that the NRLW should move Magic Round off. We'll get to that in a moment. The weather wasn't ideal, but I think it's great to see that the women's game has now grown to the point 12 sides and a really good day of 2 days, of rugby league. They had the combines as well, held in a couple of locations around Newcastle, despite the weather, where we saw a number of people come together to try and show their wares, including some other former sporting stars. Larissa Crummer was one of the headlines, a former A-League player. So I think overall a success for the NRL in getting their first women's Magic Round off the ground.
Yeah, I would say it was a success. Like I said, it was a little bit disappointing. Obviously, we can't do a lot in regards to the weather and stuff as well, but it seems like Newcastle's cursed when it puts on a big women's NRL sporting event. The Origin, it's rained as well, so can't get much luck there at all. But I love the idea. I love the concept. There's some great footy played as well. Some cracking games throughout it, some close games as well. But I guess one thing they probably need to reconsider is when they put it on. Like, I'm all for this being round one. I reckon make it round one, make it more of a spectacle for the NRLW. Go big at the start of it, because the further you get into the NRL season, the more fatigued everyone gets. Travel comes into it. People obviously have been traveling, and the bigger the NRLW gets, it's not going to be as big a problem, because more teams, more games played is obviously going to help. But fatigue's a big factor for a lot of, I guess, NRL fans, a lot of content creators I know would have been there. But coming into the end of the year, as they get to that finals for the men as well, they've kind of got to make that hard choice where they could be.
Do you think really that 4 weeks is going to make that much of a difference? And, are we not then off the back of Origin and everything else that we've just been, ramped on? I think they've tried to find that scheduling balance in between Origin and the finals. I don't think it's the perfect answer, right?
There's probably no perfect answer no matter what. There's probably no perfect solution no matter what. And I guess it's so hard to judge based on the fact that, we have 150 mils of rain in 3 days when it was around. So, I know myself, I had tickets. I wanted to take the young fella down on the Sunday afternoon for the Parramatta game, and would have watched a Newcastle game for that, obviously with some friends that play in that team. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it, running around with a 4, nearly 5-year-old in the rain and the conditions and what it was like. It was going to be a struggle. I guess another solution could be move it later. I know that seems weird, but when you move it later and you go closer to that final season for the men as well, a lot of people's teams are done as well. So they'll be looking for something to get out and watch. You've got to consider, I was lucky. Thursday night for me, Parramatta played, and I had a whole weekend free. But a lot of people obviously clashed with their team playing as well on the other days.
That's always going to happen, though. What I'm hearing here, JR, is that Adam Martin's a fair weather literal fan, and he's this alternate agenda that's trying to suggest, we've got Melburnians, we've got Kiwis, we've got some of your mates up north of the border who are suggesting that they'd be better locations for Magic Round. Queensland's got Magic Round. New Zealand's got, I don't know, they've got rugby union, they've got the Bledisloe, they can keep that. Let us have something here, Council.
Look, it's a sort of a freak event. We usually sort of have our big storms around that June long weekend. But here we are, sort of first week of August. But that was just a freak weather event. And it's still, we're feeling the repercussions around the Hunter as it is. But yeah, to sort of say, it rained in Newcastle, so we shouldn't have it. What's this? Turn it up.
Yeah, it's not like we're touch football in Coffs Harbour or Port Macquarie where it always gets washed out every year. But yeah, I agree. I think Newcastle deserves at least another go at this. I think it was a reasonable success. To your point, Adam, the rugby league on the field was quite good. We actually saw, in a very bizarre, useless statistic that I love, when I do my train spotting, the first ever first half 0-0 scoreline in NRLW history between the Knights and the Raiders, which is interesting when you consider the Knights are up in the top 3 and the Raiders, as much as it pains me, are sitting stone motherless last.
Well, the Raiders have been, getting absolutely whacked by teams, haven't they? So I guess if there was one team that looked forward to that weather report, it was probably the Raiders. And obviously the Knights got over the top of them in the end. But when I saw that game was 0 at half time, I was like, hang on. Started looking at the maths and what Parramatta had to do to win. And if Newcastle lost, then Newcastle came out with that class in the second half and got over the top of the Raiders.
Classic Parramatta fan trying to focus on winning premierships halfway through a season, way before its time. Oh, dear. I'm very cocky when our men's team at the Raiders are on top of the ladder somehow, inexplicably. Look, at the end of the day, we are into some really exciting runs home for the men's and the women's. Adam, it's going to come down to some really tight margins. But the next few weeks are going to be very interesting. Some games we touched on it with the men's. Obviously, the Roosters and Dolphins is going to be a big game that plays out this weekend. But do you think there's much shake up to the teams that are leading the ladder and the contenders before the end of the season in either competition?
Yeah, with the men's, I don't know. I still think Penrith are a massive chance. And I'm not just saying that because I've had a wager on Penrith about 10 weeks ago when they were paying $21 at all and $11 to make the top four. I wouldn't do that. But I personally think Penrith have a big chance of playing Melbourne in the grand final. I know that's going to disappoint you with Canberra there. And look, I've said for quite a while, and I've said this year, I said it about 5 years ago, I always thought Canberra would win a comp in the next 5 years. They've got that perfect balance of young players coming through with some experience, and I think this is their year if they can do it. But Melbourne haven't reached their form yet. Melbourne played like absolute crap against us, and we know that Bellamy's going to go to town on that. I don't even know who plays Melbourne this week. I think it's Brisbane. Brisbane down there. I want to be Brisbane because I can get that form this week. I've got a Melbourne grand final. As for the women's, well, I kind of had the Roosters and the Broncos there at the start of the year. I don't think that's really changed. I know that, the Roosters haven't lost a game yet, have they? So they're going to be very hard to beat. That back line of theirs is scarily good, but you never know who could pop up. I guess the best thing about the NRLW now as it gets on and gets some more teams is we're seeing so many more young players come through, young promising players that are getting the opportunity. And, we've seen that at Parramatta with Natasha Gale and Louisa Fiala winning it and some of those players stepping in already. So you never know what's going to pop into those teams and, I guess, shake it up.
Always finding a way to give Parramatta a rap, that is for sure, mate. Never shy in doing that. But we'll wait and see. I've got the top three in the women's as the teams to beat. In the men's, I think it is the top three, and then throw in Penrith, who's sitting outside the top four at the moment. I think they'll take the Warriors spot in the top four in the next couple of weeks, unfortunately for the Wars without Metcalf. Let's move on. Let's talk something a little bit different. Let's talk some international swimming. And the swimmers have done what we do so well in the pool. Just major international meet, JR. Aussie swimmers win gold. That's just par for the course, surely.
That's just how things work. Like that's like Aussie Sea Pool, we get gold. Like unless there's a freak USA swimmer, we're usually like at the top of that table.
We certainly are. We took pretty much all before us, Adam. We won, some of the open water swimming with the women's 5K. Then we started just picking up those medals that we, are expected to win. The likes of McEwen and co in the pool, just dominating and surging through. It was great to see.
Yeah, great to see. I think we fall one short of America or something like that. So I was looking through the tally as well. So anytime we're up there giving it to the Yanks, it's always great, isn't it? Especially in the pool because we know how competitive they are when it comes to that. And I just wish we could find a way to put that pool success when it comes to Olympics across the track success as well. We're not quite as strong there, are we?
That's all right. We've got Gout coming through. He's going to be gone on the 100 metres. Don't worry about that. He'll get it done. But, yeah, again, some of those names are Kaylee McEwen, even Lani Pallister coming up against Katie Ledecky in the 1,500 metres. They took that down to the wire as well. We won the 2 4x100s, Molly O'Callaghan. All the usual suspects did what they did. I did love, though, the swimming mixed 4x100 medley relay. If you look that up, guys, as to who won, it was the neutral athlete B.
Okay,
So,
do we have a backstory on neutral athlete B? Like, do we find out who they are afterwards? Like, is it like a Masked Singer situation?
I think it starts with R and rhymes with Usher, something like that. But
right. Okay.
They're persona non grata even while they're still winning. So you can't compete as your own country, but you can compete as neutral athlete B. I'm not sure what happened to neutral athlete A, but anyway. One of the bizarre pieces in swimming history to go down there where it just lists as neutral athlete B. So cop that, Vladimir Putin. Moving right along, speaking of sports that don't like Russians, JR, it's probably time to talk some F. And I know I've seen Nikita Mazepin lately, but he certainly isn't on the grid. But one, Lando Norris beating our own Oscar Piastri disappointingly and that gap at the top of the championship.
Yeah, that gap is sort of narrowing, but we're still on track for like the Lando chart that we had from earlier in the year. We'll bring that back up on another episode, like once we get through the summer break. But yeah, Lando pipping Oscar at the post. Well, not really at the post, but at the pit stops where McLaren followed Lando's advice and look, play to Lando because he's the only person that was sort of saying, oh yeah, one stop will work, and everyone else around him is like, a one stop is never going to be an option here. And yeah, so getting it done, like Oscar did catch him towards the end. Oscar had that little lock up. So sort of for the first time ever, we've seen Oscar have a little choke to like closing in on someone. But admittedly, like Lando choked at the start of the race anyway, so it was just a classic Lando start to begin with. What we are seeing though is some real glimpses of what it's like in McLaren right now, with Oscar saying he's not going for the win. He just needs to beat Lando. That's his only objective at this point. So, like, we now know where Oscar's actual mindset is.
It's some wild times, Adam, and it's going to be an interesting run to the finish of the season over these last, we've got a couple of races to the main break, but this is great, right? We can see that the McLaren is so much faster than the other cars on an aggregate across, and to see them actually allowed to, go toe-to-toe with each other, there's still some questions as to how much they're going to be allowed to go toe-to-toe when it gets really gritty, but as JR said, Oscar Piastri just coming out, just going, I really don't care where I finish as long as I finish in front of Lando, so if that's 19th and 20th, I've done my job.
Didn't they almost crash into each other on the weekend? Like I said, I'm not.
They did.
Yeah.
They very, very nearly did when Oscar did that dive down the inside and locked up. Like, there was a moment where, like, oh shit, are they going to take each other out?
Yeah, see, I'm not all over it. Like, I watch highlights of it and stuff. I've got a lot of mates that are massively into F1. I wish I was into it more, but I'm more a V8 supercar fan, and I just can't do the late nights or the early mornings anymore. I'm getting too old. But I see the highlights when the boys post it, and I saw when they almost crashed and the reaction in the sheds. It wasn't great. It was the garage, sorry, not the sheds. It wasn't great at all. So, yeah, it's all fun and games until they're wiping out, what are they, $1 million, $2 million race cars off each other, and then we'll see who likes it then.
Yeah, I've got plenty.
I can just see Zach Brown now, like you mentioned, sort of the V8 supercars. I remember back in the day, Dick Johnson watched two of his cars collide into each other repeatedly at a Gold Coast 400. So, like, you know, I see it.
It hates happen all the time. Chaz and Cam, I think, had about 3 Bathursts in a row when they were teammates and they took each other out. And it's just every single time. It's guaranteed. You could bet it was going to happen.
Heartbreaking to see the friendly fire. JR, can you please explain to me, though, how we had a race, not only when we're talking about Oscar and Lando, that's part of the course, but how we had a race where these 4 people all claimed points. Fernando Alonso in 2025, Bortoletto, Lance Stroll and Liam Lawson. What is happening in Hungary?
Look, I don't think it's so much just the Hungary side of things. Like, I think so Bortoletto, look, he's something to watch. Like, if we were in buy-sell right now, he would be a buy. That Sauber F1 team is starting to find form. And, like, it's just a matter of time. Like, and I've seen a very interesting stat. He has more points than Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki Tsunoda is driving a Red Bull. Like, that, like, there's real things happening at Sauber. Like, that big lineup change they've had over the last couple of years is starting to pay dividends. What happens when they turn into Audi next year is actually really exciting all of a sudden. As for Liam Lawson, dumb luck. Like, that's about it. Like, he can't drive, so, like, it couldn't have been anything. Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso, the upgrade kit for the Aston Martin seems to have been the business, and we might actually see, like, a glimpse of what they're going to be like in the future now as well.
I'm assuming that upgrade kit, based on not on Fernando Alonso but on Lance Stroll, came with a auto drive like in The Simpsons, where you can just sit on the bonnet and it drives itself.
Oh, look, clearly someone else is in the garage, taking the controls in a simulator.
Oh dear! Well, it wasn't such good news for those two, for Yuki Tsunoda, as you said, nor Lewis Hamilton on the weekend, pulling outside the points, while Charles Leclerc went from pole to 4th, but still was right up in the points, his teammate.
Yeah, look, he was, but Charles Leclerc, seen it as a complete and utter failure, being in 4th. Like, nothing but first is going to be good enough for him, and he has a very differing opinion to his engineers as to how to win a race. So,
we like seeing better than an argument on the radios in F1, Adam. I like when I go back and catch the highlights and stuff, and you just see them blowing up at their engineers back and, basically telling them that, copper middle finger, I'm not listening to you. Just, it sounds like an old married couple sometimes. It's brilliant.
Yeah, you can say what you want. You can do what you want. Just don't bring out the Lebanese rude finger, and then it's okay, isn't it?
Oh, that's a
moral of the week.
The whole Brent Naden. I don't think Brent Naden would be allowed anywhere near an F1 car. I think he's much more the V8 supercars kind of guy like yourself. On the back of you absolutely knocking F1 out of the park, as you always do, JR, we might give you a little spell, let you go and pull the strings, connect the cords, press the buttons, and do all the magic that you do. And we might bring in Lockie Avil from Round Ball Australia. Well, Lockie, it's good to have you back, mate. You've been touring the central areas of Asia with your hockey officiating, and you've made it back on a very short turnaround from a very long flight, mate. So we appreciate you coming back, flying the Round Ball Australia flag on our show.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be back, Chris. It feels like it's been probably about a month or so since I've been on. So I had to dig out the microphone out of the old dusty box that I packed it away in a little while ago. But no, good to be back.
It was great to have you back. Well, let's talk. You know, we always or often reference your English heritage on this show. Let's talk about England and the cricket. This was an interesting one. They had that series against India. It came down to the fact that they had to send out a man with his arm in a sling to try and save the match as it all started to fall apart and crumble around their ears. This was one of the best test series that we've seen in recent time. And these are two of the powerhouses of world test cricket. So lots of people are talking about England choking, Lockie, but I'm sure there's positives to take when you have a 2-2 draw against India in a 5-test series.
Yeah, I think it sets up the kind of end of this trilogy of really big and entertaining test series, right? When you think of the Indian Tour of Australia last summer that featured, one of the best test match finishes ever at the MCG in the Boxing Day test, and then India going over to England. And then, of course, we look forward to the Ashes tour later this year in Australia. This kind of 12-month series, if you want to throw in the Test Championship as well, has just been a really, really good period for Test cricket. Unfortunately, it kind of also highlights the kind of problem that we're dealing with at the moment with these three countries kind of being just the big three and, the issues with all the countries below that. But you're right, this was a tremendously entertaining series, plenty of drama, plenty of controversy as well, which you'd expect from these two sides. And, gets us, kind of chomping at the bit for the Ashes this summer.
Certainly does. Adam, Ben Stokes managed to achieve something I thought no one could. He managed to get all of the cricketing world behind India, including some of the English fans, when at the end of that 4th test, he had a bit of a sulk because Washington Sundar decided that he wanted to bat out and try and get his test century, even though the game was petering out to a draw. Why didn't they just shake my hand? Why didn't they just take the offer of the draw? Is he that out of touch with the common man that he doesn't realise that every person is going to try and get a century? And when you want to get there and go, oh, you're only getting it against Harry Brook, I don't know if he realises in the list of centuries that you have against your name, like they're not looking at Joe Root's, 38 centuries and going, oh, you got one of those against Zimbabwe and he got 2 against, Sri Lanka, but they were only bowling part-time spinners for the last 30 overs. He's lost the plot, surely, and this is karma, this test result.
Yeah, there's 3 things guaranteed in life: death, taxes, and Pom's finding a way to whinge and ruin things. But it seemed to be what happened, to be honest. And sorry, Lockie, couldn't help myself then. He said he had an English help myself. But look, like you said, it's there is always a way, and I guess it comes down to respect. Like, cricket's meant to be a respectful game, and the fact that he didn't want to let them get their 100 is he showed no respect to them as human beings, let alone respecting the game of cricket. And I guess you heard so much about the spirit of the game from the Poms. Well, was there a spirit of the game there? No, not at all.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. Look, it was enthralling on the pitch. I think some of the off-field antics seems to follow some of these English series, but hey, at the end of the day, Lockie, they always say any publicity is good publicity. So the English will ride that wave as they head down under. It's going to be interesting, though. They've got obviously a really strong batting lineup at the moment. The Aussies, our batting lineup, not so good as we saw in the West Indies. Our bowling lineup, though, is absolutely firing. So that's probably going to be the matchup. And the question might be, do the groundskeepers around Australia prepare decks that suit that, or do they just prepare a new, hopefully the best side wins? I'm hoping the latter, but I kind of hope that the best side is Australia. So that might be a with rose-coloured glasses on at the same time.
Yeah, I think the fascinating point as well with the argument that Adam just made is in, the English's heads, that's probably the exact same argument that they're making. Like, oh, there's no respect for the history. There's no respect for the leaderboards and the other names that, sit upon the centuries in those kind of tournaments. And it's just, it's funny how the perspective shifts depending on what side of it you're on. But you're right. Looking forward to Australia. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, we've had a lot of batting issues, as you said. We got the 4 bowlers that, continue to just rack up records in terms of bowling as a partnership. And then you've got others like Scott Boland, who, whenever he comes in, just absolutely smashes the door down. So the last couple of summers we've seen, it's unlikely that whole troop is going to go the 5 test matches long. So, Boland's probably going to play at the G. He's probably going to take another fifer, and people will be wondering how he can't get into the test side more regularly. But that's obviously Australia's strength. We know how to play the conditions out here as well. England has struggled in Australia in recent times, but they've we talk about like a siege mentality, and when you have all these issues coming with the team, if you can get 11 or maybe 12 or 13 players that all believe in what they're doing and all band together, then that's all you need to be a really dangerous cricket side. So if they can get that right and come here with a bit of purpose, then maybe they can cause a little bit of an upset.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they can come up with the best lineup. One thing is obviously Ben Stokes would be a fan, Adam, of Vian Mulder, who he's all about declaring just short of a real milestone because he didn't think he deserved a spot in the history book. So maybe that's what Ben Stokes was trying to allude to. We know the English like a foreigner. Maybe they'll try and sign Vian Mulder and bring him, naturalise him.
Yeah, they've had a history of doing that, haven't they? I guess looking forward to the Ashes, though. Like I said, it puts a bit of fire in the belly for the Ashes, doesn't it? Like the Ashes are always fantastic, but like I said, like as Australians, we love playing India as well. Like India always give us some of our best matches, and all of a sudden we were supporting India against England. So, I guess the old saying, the enemy is my friend, isn't, or whatever the saying is, something along those lines. So there we go. Look forward to the Ashes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. It'll be interesting to see. At the moment, the international fandom seems to be behind Australia, but we know that'll quickly turn. Everyone loves or hates the Aussies and the English, so maybe they'll just be hoping for just 5 draws, the neutral fans. But let's move on to something a little bit different. Let's talk Melbourne Vixens getting it done in the Super Netball. They beat West Coast Fever, Adam. The interesting thing about this is the netball is one of the few sports in Australia that actually bids for hosting rights. We obviously have the NRL for the grand final. We obviously have the NRL and the AFL where they're fixed venues. The A-League tried to do this at one point, Lockie. We'll get back to that in a moment. Most other of the more minor sports tend to be, when we have a look at it, that it's a home series. When we look at the NBL, it's a home and away series, or the first team through gets to host it as the A-League has gone back to. This is a bid piece where all of a sudden Melbourne then got home court advantage. They got to play in Melbourne. And then despite only just scraping into the finals, managed to go on a run and beat the West Coast Fever, who travel from Perth to Melbourne by a solitary goal to take out the title. So well-deserved for Melbourne getting it done because you've got to play where you've got to play. But is there a perfect solution, Adam, in terms of the right solution? As I said, there's different ones. There's the bid. There is the home and away final series, which a lot of sports don't have the structure for. Or there is the fixed structure of the MCG or Homebush for the NRL.
I think it's got to go the highest qualifier, which was, the Western Australian team. They won that first game, I think, what was about 30 points or something like that against the Swifts. So that should have been enough to earn them the right to host it. As you said, the Vixens just scraped through. I think they won by 1 point and 1 point to get to they won the grand final by 1 point, but obviously played at home. It's got to go, I guess, the old-fashioned, like it used to, or it kind of is again with the A-League now, isn't it? The highest qualifier.
Lockie, interested to have your thoughts. It was obviously a really controversial thing in the football world. Should it be that, or, again, do we go down an AFL or an NRL model where it's, an anchor tenant venue that signs, long-term deals, which, certainly be interesting to see.
I think you have to have something that's fit for purpose for the sport. And that's not just from a competitive sense. I think when you look at those long-term deals in the AFL and the NRL, the key link there is that they're extremely financially stable and they can look to those long-term traditional or kind of competitive outlooks. And, what the A-League does, it attempts to kind of set itself apart from those codes by having this unique of the highest qualifier get to host the grand final. And then for all the kind of, sports below that, you got to pick something that is suited for you. And we look at netball, they've had a really good season in terms of attendance. I believe they smashed through total attendance for the season, viewership on KO and Foxtel and whatnot, all up. But we've heard about, the sponsorship issues in the past and the financial state of that competition, is being agile and being able to have different competitors bid and kind of bump up that price a little bit more priority for them than, the competitive integrity of having the highest placed team host the grand final. That's obviously the question that they've got a grasp with. And at the moment, they're going with the money outlook, which I don't think potentially at this point in time is a wrong decision. So obviously it's lent one way here, but for the better of the sport long term, and then perhaps if we get a more mature competition that isn't so much of a consideration, then maybe you look at those, the options that are more competitively balanced.
It was an interesting one. If it had been, the Fever taking on the Swifts, who, as you touched on, Adam, were the top 2 sides in the regular season, this probably might not have been such as big a point. But it's one of those interesting things. It works well for the biggest sport in terms of, dollars that get turned over on in terms of advertising, all those things. When we look at the NFL with the Super Bowl, they market this out. It's hosted by different venues. Whereas when we come to the netball, people are saying, well, it shouldn't be the case. But to Lockie's point, netball is a second-tier sport and probably the lower half of second-tier sports in terms of the dollars and commercial appeal of it in Australia. We've seen that before when they had the issues around the Diamonds and the Gina Reinhart sponsorships. They need to be getting the dollars. So it's a hard balance to find. I don't think there's a perfect answer, but if it's good enough for the Super Bowl, surely it's good enough for Super Netball. Is it just that we've got 8 teams and this landed with Melbourne?
And like I said, it's a hard one as well because it's, as you said, 8 teams and so spread out across the country as well. Like, let's say that the Vixens didn't make it and it was the Swifts somehow and this game ended up in Melbourne. And that's a bidding thing. Let's say we locked it in at the start of the year, it was going to be in Melbourne. What kind of crowd are you going to get there? Like I get obviously money and the biggest thing is money, what they're going to pay for it. But you don't want your grand final to have a rubbish crowd there either because it's not a great look for your sport. I'm actually very surprised the Western Australian government didn't go big for this as well. The Western Australian government's put a lot of money into sport and entertainment lately, obviously, since they spent the money on Optus Stadium and getting wrestling events there and taking a lot of things, obviously Origin. Like, it surprises me they didn't go big for this. And obviously they've kind of worked out, hey, maybe it wasn't worth it in that regard, which is, I guess, pretty disappointing because netball, yeah, like you said, second tier, probably in the money wise, but it's a game that's played Australia-wide by a lot of people.
I'm sure a lot of the Melbourne fans will point to the fact that last year Adelaide did play host to it. They had to travel. Yes, Adelaide were the higher ranked team, but this is going to be the approach from Suncorp Super Netball heading forward. So we'll wait and see. It'll be interesting to see, as you say, Adam, what sort of turnouts they do get should they end up with a neutral situation. I know the NRL and AFL have predominantly dodged those bullets in their competitions, and again, due to their nature of being so centric to those cities that their grand finals are based in, but it does happen from time to time. They still sell out, but is there the bums on seats interest? Time will tell. We'll wait and see see how many more years Ben Homer's voice can carry the Suncorp Super Netball. Let's move on from there. Let's talk about we talked about the weather before with JR, Adam, and another game that was interrupted by the weather on the weekend was the third game in the British and Irish Lions series against the Wallabies. The Wallabies went on to win this game, and I have to say this is good old school Australian rugby from Nick White and from the big second row, Will Skelton, had a mental blank there. They were just getting into the English faces in horrible conditions, getting it done. Sorry, the British and Irish Lions, I should say, faces, not the English. Getting it done in this result. I'm going to say the series, though, because we saw that tackle in the second game, was a moral victory of a series for the Wallabies.
Yeah, they probably should have won the series, to be honest. They should have won that second game, definitely. And Australian rugby's copped a lot of shit lately. A lot of it's been going for a long time that, every time we come to the World Cup, they're constantly bagging out what's going to happen with the Wallabies. But you don't want to go off too early. They seem to be getting it right. They've got that good mix of youth coming through as well. Look, the average team is pretty much about 24, 25 with the World Cup a couple of years away. And onto the actual weather and stuff and what happened, it looked like a hell of a time. Like the atmosphere, I got to know a couple of mates who were there and they said the atmosphere was incredible and the delay kind of has made that even better. A lot of people running on the field trying to beat security. People go nuts whenever something unusual happens in the game, don't they?
Yeah, they certainly do. It's amazing. Sometimes you have a little bit of rain, people go a little bit wild. They reckon the wind sends the kids wild, Lockie. The rain sends a few people with a few beers under their belt even more wild. And then you just throw in, a bit of a delay, which means guess where everyone headed? Great for revenue, though, for the stadium.
Yeah, straight to the bar. Always helps out when the sport stops for a little bit. But this is fascinating. Look, I'm probably going to show my age here a little bit, rather embarrassingly so in front of the two of you. I didn't really know what the British and Irish Lions were when this tour was started to be advertised, because what's it been, 12 years or something since they last come to Australia. But it's fascinating. I did find myself at a sports bar with some mates during the first test and got to experience that atmosphere. Unfortunately, not so good for the Wallabies, but pretty cool event. And yeah, definitely had a pretty shocking and entertaining conclusion.
It is one of those things, right? Like, you being in your early 20s, it's one of those pieces you would have been, probably well removed from the rugby union spectre in your single digits when it last came here, as, coming every 12 years. And I think that's, it's one of those weird things that, people do forget about it or they're not, not so aware of it. I know even talking to people in my work industry, for my day job, they were sort of, a little bit confused. They're like, oh, okay, so what's the rivalry between these two teams? And even in the warm-up games, they're like, well, what's the rivalry between the New South Wales Waratahs? And I'm like, well, there's not really a rivalry between these two teams. You've got 4 of the best countries in the world teaming up to play against a state team in a warm-up game to play against one country, but they only do it every 12 years, which is why it's so significant. And then obviously they'll go in 4 years' time to New Zealand, and then 4 years later on, they will then head over to South Africa, although they are reviewing that at the moment, Adam. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think we showed enough, though, that this should be a continued thing. It's such a great spectacle. It's great for tourism. A lot of British and Irish people in Sydney the other night when I was down there, which was great to see, getting around the red spray jackets as the rain came down on Thursday, Friday and Saturday. We're everywhere in Sydney. But there's two things I want you to finish off this bit with for me, Adam, is does it have enough merit to continue on every 12 years? Is it enough of a spectacle? Is there still the legacy and the history that, means and resonates enough for everyone? And secondarily to that is, do we need to see something in the rugby championship for the success of a win and a tight game in the second game to mean something for the Wallabies?
That's just what you mentioned there before about them getting around. It was great for tourism. There's heaps of British and Irish Lions fans at the Parramatta game on Thursday night, all in their red spray jackets. As you mentioned, they love wearing their gear. I hope they packed more than one, obviously, for their journey over here, how long they were here for. But the merit, does it keep going? I love it. I love it for, I guess, the atmosphere the British and Irish brought over to Australia. Let's say like the Wallabies did a tour across there and play the British and Irish Lions. Wouldn't work as well because the culture just isn't here for that. But I look at another side of things too, and I say, aren't the British and Irish meant to hate each other? Like, you look at it, that's like, would Australia and New Zealand put a combined team together to play England? No, not at all. So I guess the world's changing so much as well, and Irish rugby is getting stronger and stronger. So it's kind of not needed anymore because I guess both, England and Ireland could probably come across and be more competitive. They'd probably beat Australia on their home soil anyway. It's, I guess, like you said, it's kind of that, I guess, the aura of what it has been over the years as well to continue it.
Lockie, is it just a case of, we talked about it before, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. These four teams, well, Britain, Ireland and Scotland provided all but one of the players. There was one Welshman in their 30-something man squad because the Welsh rugby's almost as bad as Australia at the moment. But it is amazing that they can put their differences aside for what is seen as, a pivotal career moment for some of these guys, and especially if you look at the New Zealand tour, for example, where New Zealand is seen as one of the benchmarks, you may not get to play in it because 12 years is beyond the duration of many people's career. So if you miss it by a year or two coming in, you might miss it by, 3 or 4 going out.
Yeah, I think my impression of it is pretty much what Adam just touched on, is that it feels like something that is only kind of lifted up by the history and the culture around it. And if this didn't exist and you came up with the idea today, you wouldn't find a lot of people backing that. But the fact that it has been there, and as you've alluded to, it can be kind of one of those career moments, one of the kind of bucket list career items for these players to check off. If you're going to get people traveling the world, like we've seen, I saw a bunch of them at the airport coming through, and they're going to travel around to different countries and watch rugby, and they're still going to get that support, then why not?
Yeah, well, it tracks all the way back to 1888, the history of the British and Irish Lions, when you have a look at it. And, it was very informal through until the 1950s, but has become an almost regular cyclical piece over the, when you have a look at the 70s, 80s, 90s, and they've played against, the majority of those sides, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa as their focus. But I think it's somewhere in the realm of about 150 games over that history that they've played, which is a wonderful legacy. And I think it will remain in some format. Whether the Wallabies are fortunate enough to be part of future cycles will be for, I guess, the British and Irish and Scottish and Welsh RFUs to decide what they want to do as we head forward. But let's move on from there. Let's talk about some tennis. It doesn't happen very often. Christian Monaghan will be very sad that he's not here for this, but a little bit of Aussie form. Alexi Popyrin actually is now at a career-high ranking of 19 after both he and Alex de Minaur have made the quarterfinals of the Canadian Open. Unfortunately, as we go to air, they've both bowed out in the last sort of 36 hours. But two Aussies inside the top 20, Lockie. That's got to be good as we head to the US Open, the ATP Tour Finals, which Alex de Minaur has a great chance of being involved in if he can stay in those top 8 spots. And then the Aussie Open at home in early 2026.
Yeah, Pop's kind of snuck in there, hasn't he? Obviously, we've had Alex around that what kind of 10-ish mark for a little while now, just kind of flirting around those round of 16 quarterfinal kind of Grand Slam appearances. But Alexi's done quite well. Was kind of unfortunate. Won the first set in a tiebreaker against Zverev, the first seed for the competition, and then went down in 3. So. Unfortunately, his tournament in this case ends. But yeah, the fact that he's keeps pushing and his world ranking is at that career high is really promising. And of course, you kind of want to see him continue that into the Australian Open early next year.
And Adam, I don't know what it is for Alexi Popyrin, but 2 years in a row. Last year he won this tournament. This year he makes it to the quarterfinals. He needs to distill whatever's happening in the water in Canada when he's there and take it with him on tour for the rest of the tour, because if he does, he'll be nipping at the heels of De Minaur in no time.
Yeah, as Lockie said, he got knocked out by the top seed of the tournament in the quarterfinal. So, he got knocked out by the person you think would have to be a fair chance of winning it. So, look, he could have gone to another final if he got stuck on the other side of the draw. But it's just good to have two young Australians coming through playing good tennis that aren't a bunch of flogs as well, which is always great to see, because you actually want to support them when it comes to the Australian Open. And you don't find yourself thinking, I kind of hope they lose because of the way they carried on. But they both seem to be pretty level-headed, and it's just hope when they get to the big tournaments, obviously US, Wimbledon, Australian Open, stuff like that, they can continue this form and not draw each other too early, which also seems to happen.
Oh, that's the good news about them. If they can both get inside that top 16, they can't meet before the fourth round in some of these tournaments. So that's the next stage for Popyrin. But we'll turn our eye to continue to follow them as they head to the US Open. A few of the Aussie women as well. Obviously, our naturalised Daria Kazatkina and Maya Joint, both inside the top 50 now. So great to see some good stories. And looking forward as well, Lockie, it's just a month away till the Aussies come home to take on Belgium in Sydney for the Davis Cup, which is a great chance for a bit of patriotic tennis, hopefully, off the back of the US Open. Some big runs there. Hopefully the boys can come home and both represent and knock out the Belgians.
Yeah, and the Davis Cup is one of those really cool events because, like a lot of individual sports, obviously, like when the Australian Open comes around, you get around the Australians. But the fact that it's actually a group of Australians competing against other nations around the world really kind of brings that out of the general public as well. So to have another one of those ties on home soil as well, yeah, very cool.
Certainly is. Well, Lockie, we're going to go right into your wheelhouse now that we move on from tennis. We've left this to the end to bring it home. Some football to talk about. Adam, like me, is a dyed-in-the-wool Newcastle Jets fan, but we're going to go to England because we are on the cusp of the English Premier League getting underway, and you are a very passionate English football fan with your English heritage and your ties back there. What are you looking forward to in terms of obviously 3 new teams coming up? Burnley's one of those. They return to the EPL after a very short absence. We see Sunderland back up as well. What are the headline notes as we head into season 25-26 for the English Premier League?
Looking forward to Arsenal winning the Premier League finally. After all this time, Arteta's been building. It's coming. We've got our big power forward in Gyökeres signed on the dotted line. Don't see where it could possibly go wrong. It's going to be fun. Always good when the Premier League comes around again. I am optimistic about Arsenal's chances again. But you see the way that Liverpool finished very strong last season, won the Premier League, and the way they've recruited in the off-season. Obviously, the tragedy of Diogo Jota as well is taken a lot to deal with for football people all over the world. To lose him and his brother in really unfortunate circumstances. But they look like an absolute powerhouse, Liverpool. They had a pretty quiet 12 to 18 months in the transfer window before this, and now they've kind of just come out and gone bang. So they have to start the season, as probably the favourites. You've got Man City with Pep, and you can never count them out as well. Had a bit of a down year last year, of course, but you can never underestimate them. Hopefully Arsenal are up there again. Chelsea, of course, are the champions of the world. I don't know how hard they're going to kind of ring on that title as we jump into the Premier League season. Obviously, Spurs have lost Ange Postecoglou, got rid of him, and brought in Thomas Frank. And then, will the Saudi Arabia effect finally start to really build on Newcastle, and can they become challengers? So I've kind of stuck to the big 6 there, but, there's plenty of interesting storylines, and it's a very long Premier League season. We'll have plenty of time to crack into them all.
We certainly will. Adam, one of the teams that catches the eye, if you're an Aussie football fan who's been watching the game for a number of years, is the return of Leeds United to the Premier League. I know for me, I've always been a Man City fan, but a soft spot for Leeds United, obviously, after Viduka and Kuhl spent their time there many moons ago.
Yeah, you talk about the promotions, and the promotions are pretty exciting this year. Having Leeds and Sunderland come back brings 2 massive derbies back into it. Obviously, I'm a Manchester United fan, and I don't really publicise that much anymore. I lost interest, when it went to Optus Sport, not because Manchester United started to suck, but, you look forward to, I think I looked it up, Sunderland play Newcastle on the 14th of December, which is always going to be huge. And then you've got United versus Leeds for the first time on the 4th of January. Having Leeds come in is, if they come up and back down, I talk about those 2, and you've got Burnley coming in as well, which is pretty much a guarantee Burnley will come in for 1 year, then be back down next year. But it's always pretty exciting. I love watching the relegated teams and who starts the best. It's one of my little things because usually one of them finds himself in that first 5 games up around that, top 4, top 6, whatever you want to call it. I think it's going to be their year. Then you just watch them slowly go down.
Yeah, it's always interesting watching the rises and falls, the yo-yo teams as well, Lockie. Is there a smoky? Is there a dark horse? I'd ask you who's going to improve the most, but surely Manchester United and Tottenham have to improve the most because Tottenham were, yes, they were clear of relegation, but only on points and one spot above. Manchester United not much better in 15th. Some of these powerhouse teams that have slid down the ladder, it's got to happen when others rise. But who's going to be that team? We saw Aston Villa obviously finish 6th last year. Who's going to make that run this year that you can see?
That's a really good question. Look, you've got the likes of, Nottingham Forest last year who had their really good run and then made Europe. And then you can understand where a club with not quite the depth as maybe some of the top teams would then struggle in the season after. So obviously they're in a really good place with Nuno, despite a bit of a struggle in pre-season. Do they start sliding down? Obviously, as you say, Man United and Tottenham, they'd be expected to be big movers going up. And then you kind of have those like perennial kind of mid-table Premier League sides that are always just waiting for their year to make a little bit of a move into Europe. The likes of, a Wolverhampton, a West Ham, teams like that, even the Fulhams and the Evertons. It's like, can this be your year to really push up the table and make an impact? And then there's the likes of the Brightons and the Brentfords that are kind of those, Moneyball era. Are they a selling year? Is this a developing year? Do they have the squads where they can push on and make it as well? So I think it's interesting because you have all those different storylines. Obviously, the promoted teams, as you said, there's a lot of history there. So it feels like a really good composition of clubs, lots of interesting storylines. And yeah, we don't have to wait too much longer until it all kicks off.
No, we certainly don't. All right, I'm going to push you both for a selection, not for a winner, but for a team to get relegated. I'll go first. I'm going to actually use one of those teams that you just mentioned, Lockie, the Wolverhampton Wolves. I think they are firmly in the crosshairs for relegation this year with some other teams improving. So I'm going to tip them. You can go for the low-hanging fruit and see a yo-yo club if you want. I'm going to go to you first, Adam. Who are you tipping to see themselves in the championship the next season?
Burnley's a safe bet, but I'm going to look at last year's table and see who'll drop. Hang on, give me a bit of research here.
Prepared. Lockie, I know it was a question without notice, but I still expect a preparation from Adam, so let's go to you while he figures out way the ladder's up and down.
I think the safest bet, honestly, is Sunderland. I just think I always have questions around the teams that have, too many promotions in a short space of time. Have you really had time to settle in the championship? Because obviously they went down to League One as well before you come back up into the Premier League. We saw the likes of, Luton going from all the way bottom of the professional footballing pyramid come up into the Premier League, and they fought valiantly but never really quite had it right. We saw that they were building their stadium, but they had to make, adjustments to their current one just to get it up to Premier League broadcasting standards. That kind of idea, right? So, Sunderland, they would have signed players on for long-term contracts when they were still in League One. And so how does that composition of the squad affect your performance when you do get promoted to the Premier League? So for me, they're probably the ones that would be most likely to look like they're going down.
Let's hope that they don't follow Luton Town down to League One, although they did start their campaign with a win. Maybe they're making their way back, and by the sounds of it, Lockie, you're suggesting that Wrexham might go back down as well because they've been surging up the ladder. They're a very different story in terms of the football pyramid, but hopefully we've bought you enough time with all that, Phil. Adam, who have you got for us joining Wolves and Sunderland going down?
Oh, it's a hard one. It is actually quite challenging. I'm going to go, I reckon Everton have been very lucky to escape for the last, 3 years now. And I know obviously new ground, all that kind of stuff, but I think Everton, there's a big chance they could be relegated this year.
The great news is if you're a Wolves fan, a Sunderland fan or an Everton fan, I think we've just guaranteed your survival with our tips. So well done. If you're someone else, a fan of someone else, probably need to start looking inwards. Let's move on from that. We've got a couple of other football stories to dig into here. I don't know if you guys caught this. A pro match stopped when an injury happened to an official because they had to find another referee in the crowd. This was one of the more bizarre things that I've seen in recent times. I don't know if you guys caught this news, Lockie. It's a bit of a weird and wonderful one. This is a professional match in League Two, the opener between, I think it was Shrewsbury and Bromley, and the linesman was injured and they had to suspend play while they searched for a qualified and hit replacement in the crowd.
Yeah, this is odd. I've seen a couple of them in football before, but usually it's trying to find a replacement to become the fourth official. And then for whatever reason, the fourth official has stepped on. Maybe this is a scenario where the fourth official wasn't a qualified enough linesman. I'm not sure. Because obviously they have to be qualified as essential referee, but not always the referees at that point, have their linesmen and vice versa. So pretty hilarious, climbing over, get the kit. Is it, 2 sizes too small? What do they have to squeeze into? But just another football anomaly. You think they'd be slightly more prepared for those kind of circumstances.
It's a bizarre one, and it was a Shrewsbury fan in the end that took over as the extra role. Like this was bizarre times. And Adam, you and I were talking off air, and you were saying you've got recollections of this happening in a Norwich game for the fourth official, as Lockie said.
Yeah, same thing. I saw it happen with the fourth official. I had to find someone to be the fourth official, which is a much easier job. It's crazy that they can do this. It's unheard of. It's like you being in a local Newcastle game and having to go to the desperation of pulling you on from the sideline. It's, you wouldn't want it to happen, would you?
I'm not qualified anymore, but I do have a story from a holiday when I was younger, Lockie. I was down here in Newcastle going to university, went back up to the mid-north coast to where I come from, and Group 2 rugby league up there, and I was on the hill catching up with a few friends. I'd had a couple of rehydrating beverages, and then at some point someone me on the hill and pointed out that someone had been injured in the reserve grade game and they couldn't do the sideline in the first grade game. The big issues we had was I had a pair of board shorts on. The other 2 people that were there were about 5 sizes bigger than me, and I had to carry my radio, which you'd be familiar with having been an official at high levels in other sports. The radio comms unit that plugged into my ear, I actually had to carry the radio in my hand in my board after probably 3 to 4 refreshing ales. But the good news was I still got paid for the game, so that was wonderful. I'm not sure how my decision making was. It was certainly, that's not something I'll be able to do at 38, but at 18 it was all right.
Yeah, no, I'm don't quite have a story as sparkling as that, but no, there's been a few times where I've been pulled off the sideline as well because someone hasn't showed up, or there's been an injury or something like that, a gap to fill somehow. So it's not unusual, let's say, a community or even kind of semi-pro amateur level, but for it to happen in a professional game, yeah, it's pretty wild.
It certainly is. Adam, you won't be surprised having heard that story, being very familiar with country rugby league in New South Wales. So good to see. Probably still made better decisions than I do without those hydrating beverages.
Yeah, that's actually true. No comments on your refereeing performances. I thought you were a fantastic referee and a fantastic bloke. I've never said a bad thing about a referee.
Now I've retired from refereeing. You don't have to butter me up anymore. But anyway, let's close out the show, gents. The Asian Cup, the Women's Asian Cup, Lockie, for football is coming to Australian shores in 2026, hot off the heels of that wonderful World Cup we had in 2023. And the pools have been drawn. Again, you can read as much into the pool draws and all these sorts of things as you want, but what are the high-level takeaways for you, Lockie? I was really disappointed that we didn't see South Korea and North Korea pull out in the same pool, because that would have just been, shits and giggles.
Yeah, that would have been a bit funny. I think from an Australian perspective, you've got South Korea, who are definitely the other women's football powerhouse in that group, and then the Philippines and Iran as well to fill us out. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the Philippines game has been scheduled for Perth, which was it the same fixture in the World Cup as well? The Philippines over in Perth, which is probably a disappointment. I know one of our colleagues, Matt Olsen, is a bit disappointed by that. He's a Perth boy and he kind of wanted to shake things up a little bit. But, that'll be the opener, in fact, the first game of the tournament, with Australia being that kind of 1A slot. So, not a whole lot to read into. South Korea definitely be the strongest opposition for the Matildas to deal with, but now we know who the teams are, we know where the games will be, and Football Australia can get planning a little more in terms of how they tackle these opposition. Which, given that we're still, there's still a lot of fluidity in the Matildas camp at the moment, with Montemuro only a few games in, Sam Kerr and Mary Fowler hopefully have been recovered from their injuries in time for this competition. There's still a lot up in the air. So at least now, hopefully, we've got a little bit more certainty that we can start to plan towards.
Yeah, I think those Philippines games might have been qualifiers rather than the actual World Cup games. But again, yeah, that would have been nice to see some variety. Because remember, the Philippines are in the Kiwi pool and played over there.
Yes, you're right.
interesting to see. But Adam, I think it's just another big sporting event for the Aussies to be excited about getting to. I've already got my tickets. I'm really looking forward to it for the plethora of games that are in Sydney, games being played Sydney, Perth, and the Gold Coast as the primary focuses. But it always seems a bit rough, and you always think that our team's in the pool of death. But getting the two strongest in those second and third spots in terms of South Korea and the Philippines. It's probably a double-edged sword, though, I guess, too, because you want to be battle-hardened when you get through to the knockout stages.
Yeah, I agree. Look, we're probably going we'll go close to favourites, obviously being the fact is in Australia. But I think we're the third-ranked team in the Asian pool side of things when it comes in the world. So, look, there's some tough challenges. South Korea game's going to be a cracker, but said you get you prepped and ready, obviously, when you got to play, I guess, the other bigger teams, being Japan and I guess the whatever the other Korean team calls themselves these days is the Democratic Korean Republic or People's Korean Republic, whatever, when you got to play them later on as well.
Yeah, definitely People's Republic. I don't think they've made any claims to being democratic.
I can't keep up with it.
More ludicrous than having to find someone in the crowd at a League Two game, that would be. But yeah, looking forward to it. Obviously, still a good sort of 8.5 months away before we get underway in early March. I think the 1st of March is that kickoff game, Lockie. So lots to happen. A whole A-League men's and women's season to get underway in that time. And as always, we'll have you back for that. But if people want to catch more of the gentleman's work, the football world, you can catch Lockie on Roundball Australia and Adam Martin on the Talking Para podcast. Gents, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for joining us on the Chris McPherson Show again. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Cheers, Chris.
All right, see you soon.
A big thanks again to all of you for tuning in on the Chris McPherson Show, our weekly show covering off around the grounds. A big thanks to our co-stars today, JR Carter, the man behind the ones and the twos, our resident motorsport guru. We also had Lockie Abel from Roundball Australia covering off on plenty, and from start to finish, Adam Martin from the Talking Para podcast. Again, as you can catch those guys on their podcast, you'll be able to find those details down in the show notes below. You can also catch us up to date each week on our social media channels at The Chris Mack Show on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on TikTok. Plenty of content coming to you, and plenty of daily doses coming as well. We've got the Asian basketball, the FIBA Asian Cup happening as well. I've Ben Dunn back for some more activity. We're talking some different pieces around cricket as the Aussies take on South Africa in the white ball series as well as plenty more. So make sure, if you haven't already, hit the bell down below. Make sure you subscribe so you stay up to date with notifications of when we're dropping our episodes, and get involved in the comments. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you'd like to see more of. Let us know what you'd like to see less of, unless it's me, because I'm not going anywhere as the host. But as always, a big thank you for tuning in. We look forward to talking to you again soon on the Chris McPherson Show.